Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Clifford of the London School of Astrology. This is a series of interviews with expert astrologers to discover how they approach client work and how they actually prioritize, synthesize, and interpret birth charts. We'll also discover how they go about communicating that information to their clients. Each session will introduce the astrologer's approach, and then we'll be looking at a chart or two with them to see this approach in practice. Each master astrologer is giving their time for an important cause, and the LSA is donating £150 per session to the charity selected by the astrologer. Our guest today, Chris Turner, has chosen Deadly Science, a charity that provides science books and material to young people in remote places in Australia. So let me introduce you to Chris. Chris Turner has been a practicing astrologer, teacher, and writer for over 40 years. She began her study in 1971 and 4 years later founded the Sydney Astrology Centre, the first formal school of astrology in Australia. Later, she began the Chiron School of Astrology and helped create the FAA's exam board, too. She helped initiate the first professional register of astrologers in Australia and has been awarded a Southern Cross Award for her special services to astrology. She's based in Sydney, and many of you will know her online conference, Breaking Down the Borders, the first big online conference of its kind in astrology, I think, now in its fifth incarnation and taking place this November. So a warm welcome, Chris. Hi there.
Hi, Frank. Good to be here.
Thanks for being here. Now, you've been at the forefront of a lot of these firsts. Is that pioneering quality strong in your chart?
I wouldn't say so. I had a cardinal sun and a cardinal ascendant, so I suppose that contributes to it quite strongly. But whenever I look for that pioneering, I look for a strong Mars or a strong Aries, and I don't have that. And I think I'm a person I'm a control freak. And I think that, if something needs to be done, I say, well, okay, get in there and do it. And that's how it's happened. But I've noticed, when I've looked at my resume and hear people say it, I think, oh my God, did I do all that? And there are things in there you didn't mention. So, I like to evolve with astrology. And, from my generation, I think that's important. I mean, I'm one of the oldies, having been around now for 40 odd years, 30, 40, 50, nearly 50. My God. Well, that's terrifying.
Well, that's my next question. My next question was I was wondering whether you had any plans to celebrate 50 years soon.
No, retiring, finishing off all those books that have been started and need to be finished. Yeah, they're my plans. But this current breaking down the borders, which we started 10 years ago, that's my swan song, and so I'm very proud of it. So that's my swan song. But my garden is very overgrown. It needs pruning badly. The house is an unbelievable mess, and there are books waiting to be written. That's the celebration.
So when you say retirement, you really don't mean retirement at all, do you?
I'm not going to go away. I mean, you can't get rid of me. Nobody can ever get rid of me. But I stopped consulting nearly 20 years ago now, and I stopped teaching maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And as you know, I stopped lecturing in Melbourne earlier this year, which everybody just looked at me and said, yeah, right. And a lot of people have been approaching me since to do that same lecture, and I've been very firm and said, no, 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 no. So the last job really is to retire from the board of the International Academy of Astrology, and that's what I'll be doing. But I'll still be around. I mean, I'm going to be on Facebook. I'll still argue with anybody who wants to argue with me. There's no problem.
So, I mean, the people that I've met in Australia over the years, I think it's difficult to come across somebody who hasn't been taught by you at some point as well. So I think you've taught at least a couple of generations of astrologers who are doing their
Oh
work now.
yeah,
Mm.
they now call me the grandma, which doesn't make me entirely happy. But Yeah, I mean, especially here in New South Wales, maybe not so much in the other states, but here in New South Wales, I've taught probably 80 to 85% of all the astrologers, either directly or indirectly, like my students have taught them that kind of thing. And I have to tell you this, I did walk into a meeting, an association meeting one day. This was quite a while ago, and I looked around and there wasn't a single person in that room who I hadn't taught. I'm very proud of that.
That's quite an achievement. So, in terms of who influenced you and your mentors, do you have anybody or a few people that really shaped not only your beginnings but also how your astrology developed?
Well, astrology's been something that I've known about all my life. I always knew everybody's sun sign, and I'm going back to the 50s now. I could tell everybody what their sun sign was, but I didn't know anything about astrology. And what triggered the astrology was I got hold of, with a rather interesting story, but I'm not going to go into it at the moment, but I got hold of a Linda Goodman's sun signs. And I read that and I thought it fitted my husband perfectly. I wasn't so sure about me, but it fitted my husband perfectly. And that led me to find books. Now, remember where I'm talking about now, I'm talking about Australia in the late 60s. And I mean, we had nothing. We had absolutely nothing. I mean, or any books that you could buy were all the fortune telling by the stars, this kind of thing. But I bought everything I could find. I asked around, is there anybody knows anybody who teaches astrology? And I finally found a teacher who just taught calculations. That's all he taught. And it was a 10-week course. And I tried to teach myself from, I think it's Jeff Mayo's book, but way back then. And it turned out that I had calculated completely wrongly. And to this day, I'm known for my calculations. And to this day, I can't find where I made the mistake, but I had a wrong chart. So, we managed to talk. There was another chap there in that class called John Clark. And he and I were this man's star students. Roy Knight, his name was, and we convinced him to teach us more than just the calculation, to show us how this all worked. And he did, but he was very Piscean, and we'd get a little bit of this week, and we get a little bit of that next week. And that's how I started teaching, because I thought, this is crazy. There's no structure. You've got to have structure and take it one step at a time, So, and I might add, I've got a very strong ninth house. I have Jupiter and Mercury in the ninth house. So teaching is something that comes very easily to me. So this John Clark, who I mentioned, he and I set up together. We set up the Sydney Astrology Centre. And I was one lesson ahead of my students. That's how I learned astrology. I'd have to teach them something that next week. So, right, I better go, and I'd read everything I could find. So, yeah, that's basically, and as for authors, etc., Alan Oaken was a big influence in the beginning. Rob Hand, of course, was a big influence in the beginning. Sequoian and Acker, I think, were some but I gave them away after a while because I felt that no, they're being too specific and it doesn't work that way. And of course, I love the combination of Stellar Influences by Reinhold Everton. I think I'm onto my fourth or fifth copy, and I referred to that a lot. So if I got stuck, I found that was the perfect book. If I ever got stuck on something, that how the hell is this working? And I found that was a wonderful reference book, just to give you that little nudge to say, right, oh, okay, look at it from that perspective.
Did you ever notice that you were the only woman about teaching, and was there an awareness of that at that time, or you were just doing what you were doing?
That's a very interesting question. A very interesting question. Back then, in the 50s and 60s, particularly in the early 70s, it was very male dominated, especially the professionals, the people who made money out of it. Uh, and now that you mention it, I think I was, oh no, there were a couple of women. There were a couple of women. They mainly were very, very commercial. Athena Star Woman, people like that who did very commercial, if they did TV, because they wanted someone pretty to do TV. And that's usually where the women, Karen Morgold was another one. And, you know, Karen especially was an excellent astrologer, but she tended to be used very much as a TV personality, you know, giving quick star sign, sun sign readings. But yes, it was a very male dominated field. But on the other hand, the students have always been female dominated.
Interesting. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I did wonder about that.
Mm.
When I started 30 years ago, it felt the same way. It felt like the professionals, the people with the names tended to be men, but it was at least 90% women in the classes. Um,
Yeah, yeah. The men seem to have more credo. Is that the right word?
or credence. Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. So if you could sum up what you think astrology can do for people, and really what the impact of having a personal session is for, what would you say?
The word that just came to mind when you said that is unstuck. I found, I mean, I don't find it now, but still now, I mean, you know, I still have the odd friend and such who come and say, oh, can you look at my chart, please? This is what's happening. Um, and I find that the clients usually come to you when they are in a stuck situation, and that a personal consultation helps that person get unstuck and sort of, if you like, it's like they're following a pathway and they get off it, or they come to an enormous intersection and they just have no idea which way to go. And I mean, I've always thought of astrology as being an alternate form of psychology, and that often you need to uh, calm the person down, talk to them about what's happening, and then, I mean, astrology is an astrology consultation is to me 80% common sense and 20% actual astrology. It's combining the two together that is important, and allowing that client to come to, oh, right, I see, I hadn't seen it from that point of view or whatever, and to get them unstuck. And I also think it is a very useful tool, apart from unstuckness, um, for people like parents, grandparents, teachers, those are the one person I would say don't look at a chart is when you fall in love with somebody. I always say, if you fall in love with somebody, do not look at their chart, because that's when you're in love. The whole idea is to find out about that person. And I have seen so many people who have fallen madly in love and they've gotten their chart and they say, oh, look, they've got Moon conjunct Pluto. That's it. And they've just broken it up. And that's not what it's for. It's a guideline. It's a guide to life and how to handle oh God, I'm rambling here, how to handle the events and the situations in your life. I'll shut up now.
No, thank you. I think it's important to get your definition after so many years in astrology. What when you did sessions for people, how did you prepare? Did you do much? I think we over prepare when at the start of our astrology careers, of course. But
Totally.
when you got into your flow, what did you prepare? What did you use? Anything unusual?
Um, well, as you know, I'm a dog person and a cat person, and with the result that, and a smoker. So I always prepared by lighting a scented candle to try and get rid of any odours. And toward the end of my consulting life, I did get the occasional client who would say to me, in my house, do you mind not smoking? And I wouldn't. But as far as chart preparation is concerned, I think my major fault is that I have a lot of Gemini. And I don't like being prepared, because if you're prepared, you are preconceived. This is just for me, and that doesn't work for everybody, but it does for me. It's the same when I lecture at a conference. I think January was the first time in my life I have ever used notes, um, because the old brain cells are starting to go now. And I thought, no, do not risk it. In hard copy, I'm sitting, as a matter of fact, in my old consulting room, and we have a sofa and comfortable chairs and a coffee table, and I sit on the sofa, they sit in the comfortable chair, at a sextile, close to a sextile angle, if possible. Um, and I always, the first thing I do when they come in is make them comfortable. So, would you like a cup of tea or a cup of coffee? And I spend at least 10 minutes setting them at ease, particularly a new client, because they're nervous. And this is in the old days, back in the 80s. I had a wonderful dog, an English Bull Terrier, who was one of those extraordinary dogs that was empathic. And she could pick up on nerves immediately. And she'd come in and she'd put her head on their lap, and they'd stroke her. And so that by the time we got started, A, they were comfortable, and B, I had a chance to listen to them and to watch them. And if I did any chart analysis at all, it was to have a quick look at the dynamic charts, especially the transits, to see if there was anything really big going on, because that would tell me that's the area I'm going to need to focus on. And that was it. Otherwise, it was all ad lib. And I know I made a lot, especially with lecturing, I make a lot of people very nervous when I go to lecture and I've got no preparation and, oh my God, but it seems to work for me.
It feels like what you're saying is that it feels like it's a combination of spontaneity and a level of intuition as well. Would you
Yes.
put it? Yeah.
Yes, or if you were a bit cynical, you could say people reading, and I'm not ashamed to admit that people reading is a very important part of an astrological consultation. You have to know your client. You have to be able to get out of your skin and into the mind and the heart of the person sitting in front of you, because you can't feel what they do. You have to sort of intuitive, if you like, reach out to that part of your client so you can get some understanding of where they're coming from. They don't want to know where you're coming from. They want to know where they're coming from and where they're going. And yes, you're quite right.
Yes, I think the important thing is being able to read the person in front of you. It's criticized as cold reading, as you say at times, but
Mm.
the key is it's there in that moment, and it's about, as you say, who they are rather than
Yeah. It's not
trying.
people reading like we get accused of by the skeptics. It's not that at all. It is an understanding and an empathizing, and I use the word empathizing particularly, with that person sitting in front of you. They are your entire focus for how my sessions always went for 90 minutes, but I know most people do. But that 90 minutes, on one end there was 15 minutes getting them settled, and at the end there was 15 minutes getting them ready to walk out the door. So a 2-hour session, and it's now I forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, during that time, you are totally focused on that person, not on you, not on whether you're expecting a phone call or what's happening outside the room. You're focused on them, and that I
A
think.
couple of final questions. If you look back at the people that shaped your astrology, the books, uh, the teachers or lack of teachers in a way, from what you've been saying, is there a piece of advice you were given that you've passed on, that you've always remembered about how to read for people, how to see clients, how to consult? Anything that you can remember that stuck with you that you try to employ in a session?
Not given to me because there was nobody. I mean, it's pardon me, excuse me. As you said, I was the first to do this and the first to do that and the first to do that. And I remember when the exam board started and we started to talk about the examiners all having to do the exam. And I said, well, right, I'm happy to do it, but which one of you is going to dare to mark it? Because, it's so what I've learned. I mean, it might be a long time ago since I've done consultations, but I did them for over 20 years, 7 days a week pretty much. Um, and I'd say I've learned the key word for any consultation is to listen. Listen to what that person is saying. And you often find that you might tell them something, you might ask questions. That's another very important one. Don't know it all. You don't. And ask questions. And frequently you would ask a question, and you might even say, "Oh, you can be a bit authoritarian sometimes." And they say, "Oh, no, 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 I can't." And 3 sentences later, they would be so authoritarian, and you have to stop yourself from laughing. But if you listen to a client, they will tell you their chart. It will all be there, but you have to listen with your eyes, with your heart, with your ears, with your entire being. And it's draining. It's very draining. I've heard of various astrologers who say they've done up to 10 clients in a day. And I thought, that's crazy. That's crazy. I always tried to only do one a day, maximum two. And if I did two, I would be so exhausted and completely drained. The other interesting thing I think you've got to do, and this is I learned from psychologists as well, when they walk out that door, that all goes with them. You you put the chart away and you forget it. You don't take responsibility for it. But once they walk out the door, your job is finished. You can do no more. It's up to them. And if you, um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? If you keep thinking about that chart or taking on, if somebody has a really awful life, and you take that on, and I've seen it happen. You take on their problems, you are just asking for asking for trouble. You let them take their problems with them. You've tried to guide them. You're there for them. I mean, I've always been, if they had a problem or they needed just to talk, I've always been available. You're there for them, but you do not carry their problems. So listening, empathizing, and cutting off when it's all finished. Go and have a good cup of coffee and a cigarette.
Thanks for that. It feels like you're fully absorbed in the session. And I think
Very
if
much so.
somebody's trying to do 7 or 10 a day, you wonder how much they give of themselves in that time. But also, you wonder um, if anybody can give 7 or 10 good sessions in a day. Anyway,
I don't know how they do it. I couldn't do it.
well, thank you for that, Chris. We're in the second half. We're going to look at a chart that you've brought with you, so we'll do that in a moment. Thank you.